Dedication, Foreword, and Introduction of the Seven Who Were Hanged. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Carolyn. The Seven Who Were Hanged by Leonid Nikolayevich Andreyev. Translated by Herman Bernstein. Dedication. To Count Leon Tolstoy this book is dedicated, by Leonid Andreyev. The translation of this story is also respectfully inscribed to Count Leon Tolstoy by Herman Bernstein. Foreword. Leonid Andreyev, who was born in Oryol in 1871, is the most popular and next to Tolstoy the most gifted writer in Russia today. Andreyev has written many important stories and dramas, the best known among which are Red Laughter, Life of Man, To the Stars, The Life of Vasily Fivesky, Eleazar, Black Masks, and The Story of the Seven Who Were Hanged. In Red Laughter, he depicted the horrors of war as few men had ever before done it. He dipped his pen into the blood of Russia, and he wrote the tragedy of the Manchurian War. In his Life of Man, Andreyev produced a great imaginative morality play, which has been ranked by European critics with some of the greatest dramatic masterpieces. The story of the Seven Who Were Hanged is thus far his most important achievement. The keen psychological insight and the masterly simplicity with which Andreyev has penetrated and depicted each of the tragedies of the Seven Who Were Hanged place him in the same class as an artist with Russia's greatest masters of fiction, Dostoevsky, Turgenev, and Tolstoy. I consider myself fortunate to be able to present to the English reading public this remarkable work, which has already produced a profound impression in Europe, and which, I believe, is destined for a long time to come to play an important part in opening the eyes of the world to the horrors perpetrated in Russia, and to the violence and iniquity of the destruction of human life, whatever the error of the crime. New York, Herman Bernstein. Introduction. Translated of the foregoing letter in Russian. I am very glad that the story of the Seven Who Were Hanged will be read in English. The misfortune of us all is that we know so little, even nothing about one another, neither about the soul, nor the life, the sufferings, the habits, the inclinations, the aspirations of one another. Literature, which I have the honor to serve, is dear to me just because the noblest task it sets before itself is that of wiping out boundaries and distances. As in a hard shell, every human being is enclosed in a cover of body, dress, and life. Who is man? We may only conjecture. What constitutes his joy or his sorrow? We may guess only by his acts, which are oft-times enigmatic, by his laughter and by his tears, which are often entirely incomprehensible to us. And if we Russians, who live so closely together in constant misery, understand one another so poorly that we mercilessly put to death those who should be pitied or even rewarded, and reward those who should be punished by contempt and anger, how much more difficult is it for you Americans to understand distant Russia? But then, it is just as difficult for us Russians to understand distant America, of which we dream in our youth, and over which we ponder so deeply in our years of maturity. The Jewish massacres and famine, a parliament and executions, pillage and the greatest heroism, the Black Hundred and Leo Tolstoy, what a mixture of figures and conceptions! What a fruitful source of all kinds of misunderstandings! The truth of life stands aghast in silence, and its brazen falsehood is loudly shouting, uttering, pressing, painful questions. With whom shall I sympathize? Whom shall I trust? Whom shall I love? In the story of the 7 who were hanged, I attempt to give a sincere and unprejudiced answer to some of those questions. That I have treated ruling and slaughtering Russia with restraint and mildness may best be gathered from the fact that the Russian censor has permitted my book to circulate. This is sufficient evidence when we recall how many books, brochures and newspapers have found eternal rest in the peaceful shade of the police stations, where they have risen to the patient sky in the smoke and flame of bonfires. But I did not attempt to condemn the government, the fame of whose wisdom and virtues has already spread far beyond the boundaries of our unfortunate fatherland. Modest and bashful far beyond all measure of her virtues, Russia would sincerely wish to forego this honor, but unfortunately the free press of America and Europe has not spared her modesty, and has given a sufficiently clear picture of her glorious activities. Perhaps I am wrong in this. It is possible that many honest people in America believe in the purity of the Russian government's intentions, but this question is of such importance that it requires a special treatment, for which it is necessary to have both time and calm of soul. But there is no calm soul in Russia. My task was to point out the horror and the iniquity of capital punishment under any circumstances. The horror of capital punishment is great when it falls to the lot of courageous and honest people whose only guilt is their excess of love and the sense of righteousness. In such instances, conscience revolts. But the rope is still more horrible when it forms the noose around the neck of weak and ignorant people. And however strange it may appear, I look with lesser grief and suffering upon the execution of the revolutionists, such as Werner and Musia, than upon the strangling of ignorant murderers, miserable in mind and heart, like Janson and Tsiganok. Even the last mad horror of inevitably approaching execution, Werner can offset by his enlightened mind and his iron will, and Musia by her purity and her innocence. But how are the weak and the sinful to face it, if not in madness, with the most violent shock to the very foundation of their souls? And these people, now that the government has steadied its hands through its experience with the revolutionists, are being hanged throughout Russia, in some places one at a time, in others 10 at once. Children at play come upon badly buried bodies, and the crowds which gather look with horror upon the peasants' boots that are sticking out of the ground. Prosecutors who have witnessed these executions are becoming insane and are taken away to hospitals, while these people are being hanged. I am deeply grateful to you for the task you have undertaken in translating this sad story. Knowing the sensitiveness of the American people, who at one time sent across the ocean steamers full of bread for famine-stricken Russia, I am convinced that in this case our people in their misery and bitterness will also find understanding and sympathy. And if my truthful story about 7 of the thousands who were hanged will help toward destroying at least one of the barriers which separate one nation from another, one human being from another, one soul from another soul, I shall consider myself happy. Respectfully yours, Leonid Andreyev. End of dedication, foreword and introduction.